guys! Welcome back to Not Just Mecha. It's Marco here, and today we speed paint combining the best features of acrylics and oils. Dominion is almost upon us, and I can't wait to get my hands on the new orcs. But before jumping into the big commitment of my first personal AOS army, I want to deal with a couple of unfinished businesses, and one of those is Cursed City. I love every single model inside the box, but I really can't stand Radukar in its human form.
There's nothing wrong with the model itself, and I plan to add it to a vampiric warband for Frostgrave. But is objectively the most anticlimactic final boss ever for a game like Cursed City. Do you want to be remembered like the heroes who fought a fat guy with an ugly hat, or a proper huge bloodthirsty monster? My answer is Radukar the Beast. I trimmed Radukar's large scenic base, fitting it like the Varskir on a 50mm base, and I painted it with a variation of the scheme used for the Lidl Vikros vampires. I pushed more on the vertical contrast to enhance its size and volumes, giving him a strong imposing presence. And I used more desaturated colors with a ton of textures everywhere to make it look more ancient, feral, and unlike the younger vampires, less concerned about a flashy appearance. Since I really wanted to push on the bestial aspect of this bloodline, I used as reference artworks of ogres and beastmen, but introducing a ton of greys and white to bring their palette into the undead territory, using on his mutated extremities the same colors used for the wolf pelt to make them converge on the animalistic look.
Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button to always know what happens on the channel. And if you want to support my work, like, comment, share, watch another video, and maybe check my Patreon page, where you can find the real-time footage of my videos, with every single little line and brushstroke. Thanks a million, guys!
The plan is to use acrylics and oils in a more balanced 50-50 process, using acrylics to set the scene and oils to add complexity, refine, and detail. Even if Radukar is a hero and the final boss, for the sake of coherency I want for him the same visual vibe I've set for all the other enemies. So I'm going to play with similar techniques, but pushing them a bit further, to give him the extra details and the impact he deserves. But keeping the work extremely simple and efficient, because again, even if you see this as a standalone painting session, it's still part of the general run aimed to quickly put the whole box on the table. Instead of using directly color primers like I did on the other vampires, I start from black, because I want to maximize the value contrast, and I can use a bit of extreme darkness on the lower parts of the larger elements, and all the sharpest undercuts. From here I can start playing with colors to set from the beginning a rich underpainting full of tones and different sensations. I use highly opaque paints, so I can deliver everywhere the maximum chromatic intensity of the color I chose, without worrying about the desaturation coming from the optical mixing with black, and the potential numerous interactions with all the other colors I'm going to use. I start with green on the base to set an obvious natural sensation, and I use it also on the wolf's pelt to introduce the idea of something dead, old, and probably a bit dirty and moldy. This also helps in breaking the monotony of the mass of pure white paint I'll need to bring the fur to its final extreme hue. On the main body, I start from the metallic silver of the armor. Metallic paints in the airbrush are difficult to control with extreme precision, because a single metallic pigment in the wrong spot becomes visible from miles away, and I can assure you that you'll have a ton of those shiny flakes floating around your primary target. So I prefer to paint metals at the beginning, when there's nothing to ruin, and then define better their borders with the other opaque colors on top. Their colored overspray over the metallic paint can only enrich its tone, giving the sensation of natural reflections of nearby elements. And if the overspray is a bit too much or too covering, I can quickly fix the part with few brushstrokes of metallic paint that's always super opaque. Red is my main mid-tone for the core of the body, where the colors will be a bit more in the humanoid spectrum. Again, the high opacity of Molotov paints gives me a perfect vibrant red even if applied directly on top of black, without any loss of saturation. I use the red base to start creating the modulation towards the bluish cold extremities, simply using a pure violet as bridge color. And I use it also to shade the wall spelt, keeping the general scheme tight and simple. I don't care too much about the smoothness of these transitions, and the effect works even if you overlap the tones with sharp, defined borders. You can also see how every layer initially covers an area larger than its final surface, and that's because the extra coverage gives me the freedom to modulate better the extension of the next layer, without worrying about a black line underneath or the need to go back to the previous colors to fix the gap. Blue is the last tone of the transition, used to set the idea of livid flesh, stretched and mutated by the transformation in bestial form. I use it also as undertone for hair and leather, to create a basic chromatic contrast with the warm skin and the general warmth of the core of the model. And on the fur, to set another cool tone next to the green, to support and add depth to the main white tone. Jumping from these to white is a bit too much, both for the value and chromatic difference. So I close this step with a gentle, quite transparent zenithal coat of grey that will unify all these colors in the lights, but keeping all these sensations inside the details and in all the shadows. Similar logic applying the unifying color for the skin. I use a semi-opaque ink because it has all the properties I need straight from the bottle, but you can create the same translucency simply diluting any kind of standard acrylic. The new layer incorporates all the previous colors, creating complex optical mixes where its transparency is higher. Like on the lower parts of the legs, where the skin tone and the blue base create a greenish sensation between blue and violet, progressively creating new midtones and lights, becoming more and more opaque in the central spots of application. The last airbrushed layer is applied with white ink, mainly as a zenithal light over the fur, but used also to add a few little extra lights on the skin. Before moving to oils, I use the black and grey potions from Scale 75 to darken and add depth to Raducar's hair, and to the few patches of dark leather. I find the potions easier to control on flat, open areas, and in general more subtle than contrast paints, so a better choice for this kind of applications, where I don't need a strong definitive color or an extreme value jump between recesses and raised parts. And contrast Aggaros dunes to turn a few silver details into an old yellowish bronze. With these little touches, the acrylic stage is officially over. Here are the colors I'm going to use for the whole oil stage, both for the initial priming wash and the proper painting. I have the mandatory black and white, two versatile dark tones that I basically use as cold and warm chromatic blacks, two green, blue and red hues, and two earth tones. The logic of these choices, based on my general color scheme and strongly related to oil's behavior and workflow, is to work with a simple palette, almost made only by primary colors, but able to cover every possibility, thanks to its mixing potential and the access to two different temperatures for every color. I give for granted that you already know the general flow of my oil painting process from the recap in the recent videos, but if you are new to the channel, check the playlist up here to have the full picture. In this case, the oil wash is not the final stage, like the way I use it in the rest of the Cursed City series, but it's the starting point of my oil painting workflow, like the one you saw on the Orc Shaman and the Warband of Ossiarch Bone Reapers. I use only the darkest colors for this step, because one of the main objectives is to quickly create a solid definition, filling every detail with a ton of wet paint. On the erased parts, the wash tends to be more transparent, because it's simply stretched over a larger area. But even if with a weaker presence, it's still able to deliver a ton of superfine pigments that literally fill the microscopic gaps left by the microdotting of the airbrush layers. The wash is smooth the dusty finish of the airbrush, connecting those dots in a soft continuous layer, adding also extra new tones, depth and general complexity to the mix. And I immediately take away the excess, leaving on the model only the paint I need where I need it. This cleaning is a bit more aggressive than the super gentle one I use on full oil painting. I don't need to have the model fully covered in oily medium because I'm not painting over a blank canvas, and I'll use oils only to enhance lights, shadows and transitions, but all the foundational work, and probably a bit more than that, is already done. For the same reasons, the cleaning is not complete and precise like the one I do for a final wash over an almost finished piece, because I still need a bit of that oil to ease the next step. So, something in between. The wolf pelt is an important part of the model, and it will have the highest value, so I want to set it from the beginning, because I'll regulate the values of all the other tones based on this extreme. I use dense paint and big, flat brushes to apply and blend the color in a single step, using slow movements over the well-defined details to easily catch their shapes. And I put a lot of attention to the vector of these movements, because the spot where the brush touches the model is where more paint is applied, and when I move the brush away from that initial area, the paint is spreaded on the surface, creating a soft transition. Remember, bread and butter. Thanks to the quick but chromatically complex underpainting and the fact that the main dark definition is already in place, I can complete something this complex in just a few minutes of super relaxed brush painting. In the spots where I applied more pressure or I encounter more friction, I can see marks appearing, like the ones left by a rough dry brush. But with a gentle pass of a soft and dry blending brush, I can easily make them disappear into a super gentle glaze-like blend. Again, I have only to worry about lights and textures, and the idea is to create both at the same time using the almost automatic blending properties of oils. Thanks to the thickness of the paint, the pressure and shape of every brush and brushstroke create an infinite variety of potential effects. Stippling in oils, I can easily regulate the intensity of the little random lines, directly hitting the folds I want to highlight, and blending their borders into the shadows, fixing at the same time the marks I don't like. On the skin, I use more precise and controlled applications, using sharp brushstrokes with just a tiny bit of paint to set the pale light I need on wrinkles and sculpted textures. I use a big value jump between the paint on the palette and what I have on the model, because thanks to the richness of the underpainting and the possibility to stretch the paint as much as I want, I don't need intermediate stages. So, being made essentially by 1 or 2 steps, the work becomes incredibly fast. The blending stage is where the real work happens, and where the hand has to get used to movements very different from the ones needed by acrylics. So you'll need for sure a bit of practice to control the smaller blends, like on the little muscles and wrinkles of a face. But since you really have to worry only about this aspect, the learning curve is always incredibly steep. Metallic oil paints work exactly like everything else, and I can use the same large, gentle brushstrokes I used on the fur to easily catch and highlight the sharp edges of the armor. And since this is the equipment of an old feral vampire, I don't have to worry about clean and shine surfaces, and I can incorporate non-metallic colors to create dull and opaque shadows, able to create at the same time a better definition, a more interesting flow of the light, and the sensation of dirt and grime collected into the recesses. And like working with acrylics, I can use the natural transparency of colors like alizarin crimson to create the effect of shiny red metal, using the red like contrast paint over the metallic undertone. One of the great features of oils is the possibility to correct something, erasing part or all of it. Here I'm painting the bloody tattoos on Radukar's head, but my brushstrokes are a bit too stocky and rectangular. So I come back with a clean brush with just a bit of white spirit, and I make the end of the line thinner and pointy, actively erasing its lateral parts. You must be super delicate and use only a microscopic quantity of solvent to spare the previous oil layer, but in general you can always correct mistakes in this way. Details and blends naturally become smaller and smaller, converging on the highest lights, details and edge highlights, creating more and more definition. One of the last details I apply is the illusion of a soft mass of hairs on the larger and flatter areas of Radukar's bestial fur and on the wolf's pelt. This breaks the solidity of blocky strands and empty areas, adding a lot of realism. And I can still do it even if this is 100% speed painting, because I can quickly make these lines super soft, even if I'm applying them as last stage, without the need of filters or glazes on top. And here is the final result. Less than 3 hours of work for what can easily be the cool centerpiece of an army, or in my case, a deadly final boss. I love this kind of 50-50 acrylic and oil process, because I think it's able to fuse the best and most efficient parts of the two worlds. Acrylics can do miracles in the initial stages, and combined with airbrushing, they can set stable and highly modulated bases in a matter of minutes, and you can prime, base, shade and highlight an army in few hours of work. On top of this base, oils give you rich, super quick and easy blends, able to add complexity and extreme contrast with a simple flow of direct application and blending, with a finish totally compatible with the smoothness of airbrushing, but easy to use also for sharp and precise details, and edge highlights in the final stages. So I encourage you to avoid taking definitive and extreme sides, building a versatile toolbox through the use of all the materials you have access to, and their best features.
If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe. Remember that you can ask me anything down below with a comment, and you can follow my projects during the week using one of my socials. And if you want to support my work, check my Patreon page and join the community, or maybe ask for a commission. See you next week, guys!